Welcome to Seeking Alpha, the podcast where we're diving deep into crypto, careers, and the chaos of modern dating. I'm Larissa Bunziak.
And I'm Lindsay Poss. Together, we're two women who somehow found themselves at the intersection of crypto Twitter, Silicon Valley, and Tinder. One of the things that I say to myself often when I wake up is the line from Hello, Good Morning, where it's hello, good morning, tell them what the lick read, pretty face, thin waist with the sick weave.
What?
That's how I wake up.
So that's your ringtone, or you recite that?
No. I recite it to myself. It's like a mantra. Pretty face, thin waist with the sick weave.
With the
It's Rick Ross, as it should be.
You wouldn't get it.
Yeah.
Right.
Look like a horse girl. The boots. Yeah.
A horse girl from Jersey, though.
Long boots. Oh my God, the tag's still on there. Jesus. Okay, what are we talking about today?
I'm freeballing without notes, so you tell me.
Hey, we just went over this. I want to talk about crypto narratives in the news.
Exactly. That's what we're talking about today. I'm freeballing without a phone, without notes, without dignity. Let's go.
Lots of champagne. But I actually did want to talk about crypto narratives in the news. And this started, I'll give the backstory since we're freeballing apparently. The backstory is I was listening to NPR the other day with a friend, and they were talking about Bitcoin, and they were saying like, okay, crypto is a speculative asset and it also is used for illicit activity. And the friend that I was with, who is very smart, by the way, like she's a genius, and she hates it when I say that, but it's true. And she's like, well, you can't deny that crypto is used for illicit activity. And we got on this whole road, and I felt a little bad because she is very smart and extremely sweet, and I kind of jumped down her throat almost immediately about the illicit finance narrative because it drives me up a fucking wall. And I hated that NPR covered it as such as well. And the crazy thing to me is that, first of all, most illicit activity is done through regular money. Regular money covers the vast majority of illicit activity. In fact, pretty sure TD Ameritrade just got in trouble for like helping people launder billions, which like is just not like the level is just not the same in crypto. And the second thing is that in crypto, one of the rare parts about it is that you can actually trace transactions. So if people make an illicit transaction, you can go back and find it.
Exactly.
And you can get so much stats about how much activity on each network is actually illicit or did go to bad things or whatever it is. Like you can get so much data. Like I would love to know where people get their data on how cash is spent because you can't. And so like the whole like news narrative that crypto is only for buying drugs or funneling weapons or whatever is just one that drives me absolutely bananas because I feel like the industry gets hammered for being better than traditional finance at seeing where money is going. It's better. So that's been something that's like been top of mind for me lately. And like, I feel like people who aren't in the industry still think like, because the news is so heavy around this, they think like, oh, crypto's for buying drugs. And it's like, no, actually, we're not even close to that. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it is extraordinarily annoying. It says more about the reporter who's publishing the article and the people who believe it than it does about the industry, I think.
Yeah.
But obviously, the majority of illicit transactions are done in cash because it is
Vast majority.
Like,
it's not even close.
The fact that it's even being brought up is so painfully and embarrassingly on their part myopic because like what the fuck, like you think that just because crypto exists now people are engaging in terrorism.
Yeah.
now fucking
they were waiting for their opportunity,
and buying fake IDs and ordering drugs on the internet. Like now that crypto exists, okay, yeah, no. It's always been an issue. It's always been something that has happened through traditional financial institutions. And now finally it is traceable. But obviously the media, the mainstream media especially, that loves fear, uncertainty, and doubt is going to capitalize on this. The fact that it's now provable that people who have committed crimes are using crypto to pay.
Which is crazy. It's like you're capitalizing on that in the wrong way. It should be like a celebration of like, look at what we can do.
It.
Yeah.
Now, because entities that are used in the U.S. are required to go through something called KYC, Know Your Customer, which is a process where in order to onboard onto that and use that platform, you need to submit your identification. So your identification is linked to your account. So ultimately, your account activity can be traced back to you. And so if you're enacting in transactions from this account. And even though it's a pseudonymous wallet address out in crypto public on the public.
Just to put a pin in that too, pseudonymous is a way to protect your privacy too. So like,
Yeah.
So we've talked about this in the past, but just because accounts can be traced back to one person doesn't mean that everyone can see who that person is or what they're doing with their money. So there's still privacy aspects.
Yeah. So pseudonymous is
there's a level of privacy.
It's like
and
a
protection.
Finsta. It's like a Finsta. So there are ways legally to connect a person to an account, and if they have to, then they can see all the activity that you've done.
I want to go back to one of the points you said, because at one point we were talking about the people who actually believe these narratives. And obviously you and I are like coming from a completely different position because we are in the industry. So we see every day what people are doing and how they're working and all of that. But for someone who is not in the industry, like these are the narratives that are being fed. And that drives me bananas. Because even like, so I'm trying to think of like an example of like an industry I'm not that heavily involved in, where I'm like seeing news stories. And I would say maybe healthcare, or even actually AI is kind of a good one. Like I'm a heavy user of AI, but I don't necessarily know about all the developments going on in it. Like I do rely on media and news sources to teach me what's happening in the world of AI. If you're someone who relies on media and news sources to teach you what's happening in the world of crypto, and these narratives are out there and they're so strong, it's exhausting. It's exhausting to be like, hey, actually, that's not a thing that's even close to true. And it's really detrimental to the work that's being done. And it's really detrimental to innovation. And again, like the friend that I was having this conversation with she's brilliant. She's brilliant.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, it's used in illicit finance. And I was like, oh my God, like you are so smart. But like, you're not in the industry, you know? You're not on crypto Twitter.
Yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah.
And she's super smart. And it's like, I get so bothered by the way media is shaped around the industry. All that anyone knows is SBF and illicit finance. And it's like, there's so much happening. And anytime anything good happens, it's like, well, there's illicit finance. And it's like, okay, can we just like, so I don't know, you, especially as a PR professional, how do you work on like redefining that narrative for average audiences?
It takes a lot of education and a lot of the counterparty's receptivity to being educated, because the way media operates, like they're not experts in a subject. They will only hear the loudest voices in the room. And if the loudest voices in the room are shouting that it is being used for illicit reasons, then that's what they're going to hear. And of course, that's what they're going to report on, because that's what's going to scare people and make them read about it. It is a harrowing effort and an extremely arduous effort, but part of it is taking the time to explain the other use cases of crypto, which is why we like to highlight things like people being paid through the UN in Ukraine who are fleeing the war and getting their money instantly, because they're being sent crypto stable coins over the Stellar network.
Shout out Stellar.
Versus getting wire transfers through Western Union or another traditional source that takes days.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about countering the really negative stories with ones that highlight the benefits of the industry.
I guess like too, well, and that is absolutely true. Like the counter narratives are super important, but actually one thing that I wish would happen is I wish like illegal and illicit activity in traditional finance was more covered, so that we like all had this understanding and this baseline of, hey, people do shitty things with money.
Yeah.
Like it is what it is. It's not limited to cryptocurrency by any means.
Yeah.
It does happen in cryptocurrency at a significantly smaller rate, and it's more traceable, which is a huge positive, like I said. But it's like there is this like determination with crypto in particular to like paint it as that. And it's like, if you really want to talk about the monetary system and the problems, there are so many scandalous and sexy stories you could go after. So many.
Yeah.
That could dominate.
Exactly. Like it's not confined to crypto.
Well, it's just so crazy to me because that TD Ameritrade story, I listened to it on the Wall Street Journal podcast, which they do a daily podcast about money, and it's great. I recommend it to everyone out there. They have super interesting stories that they cover. But that was like the one time I heard about it. And it was like a massive laundering story. Like they're going to get hit with a huge fine. There's a big investigation. Like it's a big deal. It's a big deal that happened in an institution, and it gets zero coverage.
Yeah.
And then Bitcoin hits 100K and all of a sudden everyone's saying like, oh, it's just used for illicit activity. And it's like, what? Like this didn't even have to do with an illicit finance story, and you're still tying that back. Meanwhile, there is an illicit finance story and you're not covering it. And so that mismatch is just so irritating. And maybe this is like me living on crypto Twitter too much. But this mismatch is so irritating.
It is, because you're not getting the full story, and you never
No.
will. And
Well, and it's media's
Yeah.
job, because like
Yeah.
in a day, you physically cannot get the full story of everything that's going on in the world, right? Like it's media's job to curate those stories and allow you to create, to form your own opinions, to learn, to educate yourself. And there's such a failure on the part of traditional media right now in crypto. And I say that as someone who's like, I'm like a traditional media junkie, right? Like I listen to Up First, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal, and Vox every single day. Like,
that's why independent media exists. Shout out us.
yeah, exactly. And like, I think traditional newsrooms are so important. I think the ombudsman, the person who fact checks every story, is like such an underrated career. Like investigative journalism is like something that I'm deeply passionate about. I think it's a dying field that deserves attention because people will put in work for that. So like, I like traditional media.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you guys are making me hate you.
Yeah. I mean,
You're doing
yeah.
this to yourself.
I've had a number of interactions, not even a number, a plethora of interactions with reporters who have been interested in the right story, like the actual utility of crypto beyond things that are clickbait, and their editors kill it. Because ultimately, the media is a money-seeking business. Like it's a for-profit entity that wants people to click on the headlines.
Mhm.
And if they're reporting straight on the facts, like it's not as effective,
Right.
because people don't care so much.
Which is super unfortunate, because as I do independent media, like this is super important. I'm just like worried about a future where everyone's getting their news from Substacks. Like,
Yeah.
then there's no ombudsman. It's you have no idea what the bias is. Like in general, media organizations and larger news organizations do owe people fact checks and
Yes.
bias checks way more than independent sources do.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if that's a system that we're like losing, I don't know what to do.
I think it's like the usherance of direct to consumer news, because now people can go on Twitter and learn from companies what they're doing versus having to get the digest from the media. And it's like a lot more effort and work on behalf of the person who feels like they want to be educated, which excludes
Right.
a huge
Right.
population.
I know. You have to do so much on your own. Well, actually, I want to ask you too, because our industry relies so heavily on Twitter. And obviously, like, Twitter was for a very long time my extreme favorite place on the internet. And when Musk bought it, I gave him a chance. I was like, maybe this will be good. Maybe my worst fears won't come true. And then my worst fears came true. I didn't expect us to like rant about truth.
This is what happens when you football.
I know. Now we're like ranting about truth in media. It's great. But what do you think of Twitter as a source, and how do you use it?
I think of it as a first person account source. So like recent emergence of debunking stories
Yeah.
is a good example, because when the Silvergate financial crisis happened, when banks
Silicon
were just
Valley Bank collapsed and
Yes.
Silvergate followed.
when banks were just being shut down, then all these startups that, because they were so crypto friendly, all these crypto startups like were all of a sudden without a bank and had a lot of monetary problems following that.
Mhm.
And it was not covered by the news. And so the fact that this like populated on Twitter as a narrative because of ultimately like the Joe Rogan podcast and like
Mhm.
Mark Andreessen going on it and talking about it, and then people were sharing a lot of like Me Too stories. Like that's the way it happens. I mean,
Right.
even like the Me Too incidents, like
Right.
the actual initial Me Too stories about women who had been
started on
sexually
Twitter.
harassed, like they,
That was pre-Musk, I want to point out.
oh yeah, but
Just
like,
in case.
but like, no, that was like a very powerful example of like direct consumer information, because the news organizations where the culprits were coming from obviously were not going to cover these stories, but because people started speaking up on social media and on Twitter,
Right.
it inevitably gained attention. And like it's one of the ways that power has come back to the people. So I do, of course, with grains of salt, use Twitter as an information source, because
Mhm.
it's real people sharing real stories. Also, anybody can post anything. So like you need to be careful, but there's a lot of legitimate information being shared there.
Mhm. No, I think that that's accurate. I mean, I'm still someone who, when something's happening in a local area, like the first place I go to is Twitter to read the most recent tweets to
Mhm.
see, like, it's actually like weirdly how I found out a lot of traffic information. But no, it is like the most real time kind of source of news and updates. Where I struggle is I've met so many people, and men in particular, who will say like they feel like information is being suppressed elsewhere, that they can only find it on Twitter. And that's just like, to me, that's just replacing one problem with another. So I just said that there's issues in traditional media. I'm fully willing to admit that. I think like I have to be equally fair to Twitter and say like, there's issues with Twitter. I'm willing to admit that. Like,
yeah, like goddamn, if I see another fucking text post, like a huge text in a picture that is on my feed, I will sue you, Elon Musk.
It's just like,
it is my entire feed.
It's so weird to me. And I've had like a lot of men in my life say this, where they're like, I don't trust media, which I get to a certain extent. Like, I think that there's ways, again, you can be a conscious consumer of media and understand, you know, what stories, what outlets, what journalists are properly covering things, but then they fully trust Twitter. And I'm like, that's literally just, you're just moving the problem over.
Yeah.
You're not becoming a conscious consumer. You're not thinking about the content you're imbibing. You're just replacing one bad form of content, or I shouldn't say that. You're replacing one form of content that contains multitudes of good and bad with another form of content that contains multitudes of good and bad.
Yeah.
And you're completely ignoring the bad.
Yeah.
And so there's been this weird narrative for me in a lot of conversations I've been having about like information suppression. And it's like, no guys, like it's all out there. It's all out there. You can find whatever information you want.
You just need to be diligent enough to do the research.
To determine the
find what
sources.
is the
Yeah,
truth.
exactly. So it's like, it's so, I don't know. I've been finding that like a difficult thing to combat lately, because so many people like in our industry or our industry adjacent, and so many like dudes online, frankly, are like, no, Twitter's my only news source. And I'm like, but like, then like you should have a variety. Like Twitter is one of mine. Traditional media is one of mine. Research papers are one of mine. Like broaden your horizons, and then you know that there's some sort of mix of the various sources that you have that will allow you to understand the world at large. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me that you would like go all in on something.
Because you're never getting the full truth. And so like that is the unfortunate reality, is that like you need to get pieces of the truth from a variety of places, because nothing is unbiased.
Right.
Nothing.
So if you are reading all of these different sources that have different issues, different biases, at some point you can conglomerate all the information into one thing that like actually makes sense. I don't know. I feel like, especially in like a post-COVID world, there's so many like people were hiding health information. I'm like, people weren't hiding health information. It's fucking hard to communicate health information. Like, like you have like huge failures on the part of the government to do that well. Fully admit that like their messaging was awful, but it's because this shit is complicated.
Yeah.
Like you can't distill it into a single message. It doesn't fit into a tweet, and it does change daily. Like that's science. Science changes all the time. That's why we have rigorous testing standards, because there's constantly new information being added. And so if you're saying like, oh, this is wrong because it changed, it's like, well, like
not really. It's not so black and white.
Or like, oh, I'm mad that like they didn't cover ivermectin. And it's like, God, you got to pick and choose your battles, okay?
Yeah.
There's one study on ivermectin and it got disproven almost immediately. Did it say that it worked at first? Yes. Were they going to say with nuance? Oh, there was one study that showed that it somewhat worked in one capacity, and then very quickly there was an inability to replicate that study across a wide variety of capacities in different populations, so you shouldn't be using it. Like, is that an easy message to send out to the public? Or are you just going to say, don't use ivermectin, and then everyone's going to yell at you for suppressing information?
Exactly, because people read the headlines and then like the first few sentences, and that's it.
Yeah, I guess it's like the death of nuance. This is like a problem. Like if you're consuming your media in one format, you're completely killing nuance, in my opinion.
Of course. And then you're not a fully informed person.
No.
Like, I don't know how many people care to be.
I know. I always struggle with that too. But my issue is not, if you don't care to be fully informed and you choose to maybe like, I don't want to say fully trust the opinion of experts, but kind of like make decisions in an interest, in a way that like shows your own self-interest, but like kind of relies on the opinion of experts. I'm okay with that. Like if you're kind of just like, I'm going to let go and let God, it's like, more power to you. But if you're someone who's not like that and is going to proclaim that they have the knowledge or the understanding to know things, or proclaim that information is suppressed from them, then you're wrong.
Yeah.
Like
And
no information is suppressed. Get out there.
Yeah.
Like we fortunately don't live in a place like where there's there's very light restrictions on our internet. I wish people would study jurisdictions like China where there's the Great Firewall, because it's like the access to information we have is vastly different than a lot of places. And so it's like if you feel like information is being suppressed from you, then you're just not looking for it in the right ways.
Still, though, interestingly, like in the US, because of corporations and stuff that operates on a level so far beyond our realm, I do see the argument that it is to a degree suppressed. I'm not saying that it is suppressed like proactively in like the reporters hiding stuff. That's true. But in the democracy index that Norway produces, the US is number 36.
Not great.
Because of media independence.
Mm-hmm.
Because the media is...
Sinclair Broadcast Group owns like a
so
ridiculous percentage of local channels.
By certain corporations that like they will not publish certain information, like they will not publish certain types of stories about certain companies. Or they will like gatekeep it until the 11th hour because they're protecting their own commercial interests. So like,
definitely.
I don't think that it's 100% freely available, but I think that if you want to do the work, it is out there and it is discoverable ultimately.
That's the thing, is even knowing that it's not freely available means that more things are available. Like, yeah. If we truly, and I still think, like, to your point, I still don't think we necessarily know the depth of information we're receiving, but we know enough depth to know when things aren't being covered in a way that they should be. Yeah. And that is more depth than a lot of places.
Yeah. No, totally.
I read an entire book earlier this year on Putin's propaganda machine. And that's just like completely different. Like that's a whole different ballgame. Yeah. Because the way information is shared within that country is so tightly controlled that there is truly no way to know anything different. You are misled from birth. Like he has created a media empire that's brilliant and terrifying. It's Arkady Ostrovsky's book, by the way, The Invention of Russia. Highly recommend it. But so it's just like even having the knowledge that there's issues in our media is greater.
Right.
Than
yeah. Having the autonomy to go and find further information is part of the job.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, I don't know. We both work in like media and marketing. How have you seen like your role in creating these I don't know, like changing the story, being independent? How has that changed for you?
It's interesting because a lot of the work that I deal with clients is making something newsworthy when like ultimately it wouldn't be. But these clients want to get into the news, of course. So we need to work with them collaboratively to engineer stories ultimately. And it's like knowing that in like my benevolent goodwill capacity that I'm doing this, I also know that people who have malintent are doing the same thing, and that they're engineering stories and they are promoting their commercial interests through narratives that are ultimately engineered. It is devastating, but also the reality. I mean, all you can do is like combat the bad with the good and like fight the good fight.
Yeah.
Because that is like the media gets their information from sources and like from publicists. So all you can do is like try and bolster the companies that are doing good work and people who are doing good things and try and counter the narrative.
I mean, working on like media and marketing has been fascinating for sure. I come from like a data analytics background. My background is in behavioral economics. It's in public policy. So I like got like funneled into comms and marketing just by way of being good at talking, basically. But no, it's been like, for me, it's been like fascinating, especially working in an industry that for all intents and purposes is like 6 years old. Like then that's being generous. Like obviously the white paper was published in 2009. Like there's some, but the industry like really is not that old. And so there is a chance to like create these new narratives and start off the ground, but it's been really difficult to see the ones that have gotten steam versus the ones that haven't. And to be like constantly almost explaining to people what I actually do in a way that like if I worked for the Swift banking network, I just wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
It's tough out there.
It's fucking hard. And then you got a date and guys have to be like, why do you have to get on a call so late? I'm like, because I'm trying to fucking change the world,
Yeah.
okay?
Is that how they talk to you?
So actually, this one guy, yeah, that was literally his. Oh my god, he was so whiny and annoying. He would be like sleeping. He worked at like this corporate, and I swear to God, he would come over and like by 9 he'd be passed out on the couch, and like I would be drilling away working. He'd be like, "Why are you working?" And I'm like, "We are different breeds. You'll never get it."
Okay.
And
I
then
love
the guy,
that.
I ghosted, and
Yeah.
this
The
is
theme.
why. Okay,
The theme. I know. Well, I will say, like,
I was busy.
yeah. I mean, crypto Twitter really doesn't sleep. Like, I've recently, I don't know, it's not so recent, but I've recently become very online in a way that I've always been like kind of online, but I've like really been sinking in lately.
Circadian fluid.
Yeah. It's been fun.
Yeah.
I love being online. But I actually I did struggle for a while, like when Twitter changed hands. I still I can't call it X. It's like too confusing for me.
Yeah.
It's Twitter. When Twitter changed hands, it sometimes I log onto Twitter and it's like so fun. And other times I log onto Twitter and I feel like I'm immediately being attacked for being a woman. And I'm like, oh my God.
By who?
Andrew Tate and his acolytes. And there's just
Is Andrew Tate engaging with your tweets?
no, I just mean in
Yeah.
the
I hear you.
in crypto Twitter and who people follow, in the narratives that they're building in their head. Sometimes I log in and within 3 minutes I'm reminded of my gender. And I'm like, what if
Yeah.
I could just I remember the days so fondly when I used to log in and laugh at jokes and watch NBA clips.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I see these kinds of things too. And I follow one. He's not a white supremacist, but he definitely leans very conservative, German.
He's red pilled.
Yeah. And he tweets a lot about women needing to be housewives, stay at home, blah, blah, blah. But I'm able to tune that out kind of for the nutrition advice that he offers, because it's a lot about what to eat and stuff. And he has shared about his weight loss and stuff. And I don't know, it's just interesting to see the different types of content. And I'm
Mhm.
able to just nullify the things that are I just deem as dismiss as stupid.
Yeah.
About gender roles and stuff like that. It doesn't even faze me at this point, because it's just
I actually think that's kind of an unintentionally radical position, because I think that over time we've lost the fact that people contain multitudes and they contain a lot of competing views, and having some bad views doesn't make you a bad person. I don't know. I've struggled with that throughout the years. It's really, really easy to be kind to people who agree with you. It's really, really difficult to remain kind when people don't.
yeah.
But the thing is, no one gets anywhere without that. So it's I don't think that everyone in every position has the capacity to have patience for those kinds of attitudes. And I think that that is also perfectly acceptable. If you're out there fighting for your life and getting stomped on every day, don't worry about the guy who's talking about gender roles. Just don't follow him. Don't talk yourself out of the other stuff. Don't do it. But I think you and I are both people that are very fortunate in our lives and have the capacity to not look past that, but to have patience for that, and to have patience that underneath of that or alongside of that, it can still be a good person who just needs to not be isolated in their own opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea whether this guy is a good person or not. I haven't really come to that conclusion, but I know
not
that
even
some of
just
the
a good
stuff
person,
that he
but-
shares about cooking
Mm-hmm.
is interesting. I mean, I'm starting to dabble in cooking beyond.
Are you?
I mean, beyond almond butter and jelly on a wheat wrap that I fry as a crepe, which is delicious. But my one and only
We live very different lives.
delicacy. I don't know. He just shares stuff about seasoning chicken and whatever, and that's what I'm there for. And I get the housewife bullshit as a tangential that I do not even I don't flinch at, because it's not for me.
Yeah, I just think that that is actually somewhat of a rare position to take.
Wow.
I think it's easier to flinch at it or get outraged or
Yeah.
write off, throw everything away.
Yeah.
I think that that's become kind of the standard practice, and I just don't think we get anywhere with that.
Yeah.
In the
No.
same way that, like, this is what bothers me about, like, dudes that are so committed to Twitter. Like, stop, like, I guess, like, the theme of this episode that's emerging is that, like, I'm tired of the all or nothingness of everything.
Yeah.
Where it's like, again, like, you and I have capacity. We are at places in our lives where we are stable and self-reliant. We, in a lot of ways, don't face that many barriers or challenges. Like, a lot of the challenges we face are from ambition and things that we do.
Hey guys, not sure if you could tell, but we were both a little very drunk during this episode, and as it turns out, so was producer Matt, because he stopped recording in the middle of us talking. Or he just, like, wanted to shut us up. I don't know. Either way, that's the episode. Thanks for listening, and hope you enjoyed.